Anyway, we read this last time. I want to go back to it again. There's a couple of comments that I want to make. And this, Yeshivat Ohr Somayach, will be the last of this series. And next week I'll start something else. I haven't decided what to do yet, but into it next week. So we have the 13 principles. We've gone through all of the 13. I'll put on the better glasses. That's better. And he says, when a person has these principles in hand, meaning that he's committed to them, and his commitment is well, of course I can't know the nuances of the Arabic. Nechona in Hebrew means like appropriate. Then he joins Klal Yisrael, the Jewish people. We have all the responsibilities to him as a Jew. Love and brotherhood, friendship, mercy. And then he says, even if he did everything he could of the transgressions of the Torah, because of desire, in other words, he has desires and he's not controlling them. And notice I didn't say he couldn't control them. That would be prejudicial. That would make it sound like he doesn't have free will. He's not controlling them. And I'm leaving open how you deal with questions of free will. So it's a desire or the powerful effect of his and our, I would say, poor nature being embodied, and the body naturally draws a person in the wrong direction. He says he is punished according to the severity of his transgression, and he has a share in the world to come. So first of all, where he's coming from is, this is the Parak Helek, the first Mishnah begins, Kol Yisrael Yesh Lahem Helek L'Olam Haba. The whole of the Jewish people has a share in the world to come. But now he's told us that a person who doesn't have these principles in hand, and as we said yesterday, it means he denies them, he isn't a member of Klal Yisrael. So if he's not a member of Klal Yisrael, the Mishnah does not assign him a place in the world to come. It's only assigned to Kol Yisrael Yesh Lahem Helek L'Olam Haba. So he says, if a person has these principles and yet commits other crimes, those crimes will be fixed by the punishment that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives him, and he has a share in the world to come because he is a member of Klal Yisrael, because he has these principles in hand. The problem is that there are other ways in which a person can lose the world to come. We saw this at the beginning of this introduction when we read it. There are certain crimes, according to a certain numeration of them, 36, mitzvahs of the Torah, which if they are violated, have the penalty of kares. And kares means being cut off. And although there are discussions, at least sometimes it is said explicitly, being cut off from the next world. Such a person could, like idol worship, for example, such a person could have all these principles in hand, be committed to them, and still commit idol worship, as the Rambam says, because of desire or because of the conditions that he's living under that are hard to combat. And the Torah tells us that the punishment for that is kares. And he too will not have a share in the world to come. So for some reason, the Rambam is ignoring that aspect of the other way. The statement here can't be an absolute statement covering all cases. What he means to say is that in terms of your belief and commitment system, if you have all 13 of these, then mere crime will not deprive you of a place in the world to come. Whereas if you fail at one of these 13, that by itself will cost you the world to come. That's the contrast he means to make. Though it sounds in the words as if it's a total contrast, I can't do a better job of putting it into the words, but the facts are too clear, they're uncontroversial. He writes about them in all of his works, so there's no question that that's what he's got to mean. And then, as he says, and then if he commits all these crimes and he's punished for them, he gets definitely a derogatory title. He's called one of Poshei Yisrael. Poshei means deliberate, vicious criminal, but he's one of the Poshei Yisrael. But then, as he goes on to say, if his commitment to one of these principles weakens, then he's exited the people of Israel, and he has denied the Ikar. Of course, there are 13 of them, but and this phraseology is very vague, and it occurs very often. You remember probably from the Haggadah, Kafa Be'ikar. He's denied the fundamental. So someone would say it's a synonym for denying God. Or there's a kind of, as I say, constellation of commitment, and he's missing part of it. So, and then he has the three terrible descriptions: min, apikoros, chotes benetios. And then he's out of the Jewish people. He doesn't get the regard of Jewish people. The laws that usually apply don't apply to him. And he loses his share of the world to come. So it's a very, very drastic statement. Now, I grew up in American Reform, and one of their many false credos was the Jewish religion is a religion of action. There's no requirement of beliefs. And the implicit contrast with Christianity, but they do require beliefs. If you don't have the belief, then you're out and you're going to be punished. And Judaism isn't like that. Judaism is a religion of acting well. Okay, I guess they certainly couldn't base themselves on the Rambam. I'm saying clearly that someone who turns his back on any one of these 13 beliefs sacrifices his place in the Jewish people, sacrifices his place in the world to come. So it does sound like we have our list of necessary beliefs. And it's certainly true, we do. And I think if you consider it a bit, wouldn't it be peculiar to say that the Torah requires certain motions of your arms and legs and no commitment whatsoever of your intellect? In other words, the animal part of you has to behave in a certain way. But the quintessentially human part of you, which is your thought and your commitments and your decisions and all the rest, that's up to you. No, there's nothing to do with. It would mean that the religion doesn't apply to the highest nature of the human being. That just intuitively is an unacceptable idea. And it's also unacceptable for the reason, I think I said this the other evening, I didn't say it in this year, but did we talk about virtue? I can't remember. I don't think so. It's not enough to do the right thing. You have to do the right thing for the right reason. If I take a person who's not interested in keeping Shabbos And I say, I'll pay you. I'll pay you. Good money. Yeah, Rabbi. How much? X and X numbers per Shabbos. You're on. I'm not even earning that when I work in the office. I pay to keep Shabbos. He has not become a Shomer Shabbos. He's just earning money by not doing malachos. He's not fulfilling the mitzvahs of Shabbos at all. Because a mitzvah is a relationship with a commander. A mitzvah is where you say, the commander ordered me to do this, and that I'm doing it in order to fulfill his command. This guy isn't doing it in order to get his paycheck. So, the idea that it wouldn't command your belief system seems to be a non-starter. Now, the Rambam here, as I described yesterday, is talking about a person who was brought up inside and was taught and understands and so on, and then turns his back on it. We said clearly that a person who didn't have an opportunity, a person who was never educated, is not part of this category. For one thing, he says, the verse that expresses this idea is Misanecha Hashem esna. David Melech says, God, those who hate you, I shall hate. A person brought up in, I said, Cincinnati, Santa Fe, Albuquerque, and he's had no contact with other Jews and had no education, can't be, and he doesn't commit himself to these 13 principles, of course, could hardly be called someone who hates God. He just doesn't know anything about it. If he's a smart and careful person, if you ask him about one of these principles, do you believe it? He would say no. And if you ask him, do you disbelieve it? He would say no. I have no opinion about it at all. I've never heard about it. I've never discussed it. Never studied it. I don't know what to think. Such a person could hardly be called one who hates God. Then the question will be, how could there be an obligation to believe something? First of all, can you just decide to believe something? Okay, told me to believe it. I believe it. I could pretend to believe it. I could say it, but believe that Macron is going to lose the next election in France. Is that something you can just sort of decide to believe? It seems bizarre to talk that way. It's not part of human experience. Just decide to believe something. And in particular, your ability to believe depends, for most people, hopefully most of the time, on the state of your evidence. If you have a lot of evidence against something being true, somebody puts a gun to your head and says, I'm commanding you to believe it's true, I think you say, but I don't know how to do that. Because it seems clear to me that it's false. I won't talk about it if you like, I won't contradict you in public, but I can't change my mind just because you put a gun to my head. It's not in my control. So, what is meant by this is a mitzvah to believe these things? And we've talked about this in another context, but I just want to point out that it applies here as well. Again, I can't remember if it was in this series of shir, another shir, probably another evening shir again. Talked about mitzvahs for emotions. There are mitzvahs for emotions. You have to love other Jews. You have to love God. You have to have awe for God, fear for God. You're supposed to serve God with joy. So that's also an emotion. Emotions are similar. You can't just snap your fingers and be joyful, usually. Certainly love. You can't snap your fingers and love somebody because God said so. So what's the realistic content of the mitzvah, the command, if it tells you to do something that you can't do? And the answer is that the problem is being raised because of a bad model of what you're being told to do. Yes, snapping your fingers to obey the command is not possible, but there's a process, a procedure that you can go through to fulfill the command. For example, let me make a comparison, which isn't 100%, but close. Be healthy. You're saying this to a person who isn't healthy. Be healthy. What am I supposed to do? Oh, I've got a list of things to do. Eat well, exercise, practice certain habits which will have a good effect on your emotions, which will have a good effect on your hormones. I have a whole program for you. It won't happen overnight, but you follow my program, in 2 years you'll be healthy. So be healthy isn't a pointless command. It means use the means that are available to gradually improve your health to the point where you will be healthy. We said the same thing about emotions. Events, actions, and circumstances stimulate emotions. You're supposed to be in a state of simcha on Shabbos. Well, our rules create an almost ideal environment and activities during Shabbos. Why shouldn't you be besimcha? You're not working, and you're together with the people whom you love, and you're engaged in song and exchange of ideas and prayer, and you spend time also. You spend time also in sumptuous meals. You should certainly be happy. And if you connect what's going on with your relationship to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, then why shouldn't you be joyful? So by manipulating your activities and the circumstances, you can bring about joy. So when it comes to belief, what's the program? The program is study these matters, study them with an open mind, a critical mind, study them in the company of others with whom you can discuss them. We know that they're true. We also know there's adequate reason to believe them. So the command is go through the process of investigation, and then you will have fulfilled the command because you will come to believe it. One of the ways that Rabbi Wasserman argues to convict an atheist is similar, only he pushes it motivationally in a deeper fashion. Commandments come from a commander. Obviously, if you don't believe in the commandment, you don't believe there are any commandments. Somebody says to an atheist, why don't you put on tefillin? So, why should I? Because it's a Jewish commandment. Okay, I hear that, but so what? That's just something that Judaism says to do, and I choose not to do it. God commanded you. I don't believe that. I don't believe there is a God. What complaint do you have against him? So Rabbi Wasserman argues it roughly this way. I'm putting it in my terms, but it's his idea. He said to the guy, tell me something. Did you ever have any health problems? He said, yeah. What did you do about them? Well, I went to doctors. I consulted the medical profession, and I managed to solve them. You run a business? Yes. Did you ever have any challenges in your business? Sure. Anybody who runs a business has challenges. What did you do? Well, I consulted with other people who run similar businesses, and I read books on strategy, and I learned something about economics, and that's how I was able to stand up to the challenges. See. Now, what about God? And he says, what about God? What about God? What do I have to do with God? Well, are you aware that there are very intelligent, very learned people, very educated people who believe in God? Am I aware of that? Yeah, I guess so. I mean, yeah, I've heard of that, sort of. Okay. Now tell me something. If God exists, if God gave a revelation at Sinai, would that matter? Let me ask it to you this way. If you were there at Sinai and heard God speak, would that have any effect on your life? One of the things God says is, Saturdays are special. Would that change your plans for the weekend? Well, let's see now. If I were there and actually heard God speak. It came out that Saturdays are special. I guess so. I guess I wouldn't be able to just laugh that off. I guess it would change my plans for the weekend. Okay, so now, you know there are intelligent, well-educated people who believe this. And you know that if it's true, it would make a difference in how you live. Did you investigate this? You went to the medical profession when you had a problem with your health. You consulted other people and authorities when you had a problem with your business. When you're faced with something which has a practical effect on your life, you investigated them, didn't you? You investigated it because you wanted to make sure that it came out right, because you wanted to get the benefit of being right. Well, what about the existence of God? What about the existence of the Torah? What about the revelation at Sinai? Did you investigate that? Well, actually, Rabbi, I didn't. Well, why not? Where's your consistency? It seems your policy in life is, when there are things which make a difference to you practically, then you investigate them so as to try to come out on the best side of it that you can. And you've agreed that the truth of the Torah, if it were true, would make a big difference in your life. How is it then that you didn't investigate it? This is how you can hold a person responsible when he tries to have the all-purpose defense, but I don't believe in God. And therefore, for me, there are no commandments. You can say to him, why don't you believe in God? The follow-up is, I can't blame you. You're worried about me. I understand that. Okay. I hope we'll stop. There's a program that you could have followed to carry out the investigation. Today, there are many such programs in institutions where you can go, flesh and blood, many online. There are many people with quite superior education in secular terms, whom you can write to and ask questions. So, and there are books that are published on the subject. You didn't even press a button on your computer to make contact. Well, so you have failed in what you regard yourself as a responsibility for living in a justifiable way, which is to investigate things which really have a practical impact on your life. So here now we have the mitzvah from the one side, and we have people's life policy, their principles of dealing with life, and the person has committed an inconsistency in the application of his own life policy. If you ask him why he's inconsistent in that way, well, of course, it's hard to get an honest answer. And the answers are various, but none of them justify what he's doing. One is, I just loved cheeseburgers, Rabbi, and I don't want to take a chance of giving them up. We had a guy here many, many years ago. He was here for, I guess, 6 weeks or 8 weeks, and then he left. And he was asked, "Why are you leaving?" He said, "Because I don't want to hear anymore." Why don't you want to hear anymore? Because I don't want this lifestyle. And if I hear more, I might be trapped into it. Meaning, he's hearing ideas, he's hearing considerations, he isn't able to refute them, and he's afraid they're going to pile up to the point where he can't ignore them anymore, and he'll have to change his lifestyle. It's called cognitive dissonance, buzzword, where what you know and what you do are out of sync. And he hadn't yet gotten to the point where he tips the scales, and he's afraid of getting there, and he just left. I don't know what happened to him later. Maybe he went someplace else. Maybe he did make it, but that's why he left here. So this is a matter of, or he'll say, my friends will desert me. I can't take that. So, that makes it a hard challenge, but it's not justifiable. So the idea of a mitzvah here is, on the one side, if you believe in God's existence, one way or another, and you believe there's a mitzvah, and you just say, I'm helpless because I can't do this, I can't make myself believe, the answer to that is, if you investigate and think about it carefully and read the literature and discuss it, you will come to believe. And then you'll have fulfilled the mitzvah. So the mitzvah for you is, go make the investigation. And if the person's starting as an atheist, then you say to him, yeah, you may be an atheist, but your own principles should lead you to make the investigation, because that's what you would do with anything else that you admit would have a consequence for your life. Questions up to here? No. Okay, so these are the bases of the belief system. Now, this work of the Rambam spawned a lot of comment, and there were many who opposed him in various ways. Some felt that some of the things that he writes here aren't necessary to be part of the Jewish people. They disagree that they are principles of this type. Now here you have to be very, very careful. The Rambam says, for example, believing that God is non-physical is one of the principles. The Rambam says someone who believes that God is physical is out. Having come from the understanding that he's not physical, changed his mind and was... Right. So now, when someone disagrees, like the Rabbi disagreed with the Rambam about this, you have to be careful to understand what the disagreement is. The disagreement is, if you fail this principle, how bad are the consequences? The Rambam says if you fail this principle, you're out. The Rabbi says you're not out. They both agree the principle is true. No one's discussing whether God is really a body or not. The Rabbi didn't think that God was physical. The question was, in making the mistake of thinking he is physical, how bad a mistake is it? I have seen people even get this wrong. Now, that means that the Rambam, with his discussion here and with his discussion elsewhere and with the various verses that he brings, it doesn't have to settle the issue. There can be others who disagree. The Rambam in the Mishnah Torah says that he uses very, I would say, ironical language, almost bitter. He says, Gdolim mimenu, there are those greater who have thought that the world, that the Creator is physical. And mimenu in Hebrew is deliciously ambiguous between greater than we or greater than he. So it's not clear how sharp the Ravid meant it. And therefore, although they're wrong also, no question they're wrong, but you can't cancel them as Jews because of this mistake. That's the Ravid's position. And by the way, if you have ever learned anything in the Rambam and seen the Ravid's comments, some people are a little surprised that the Ravid was so tough against the Rambam. He had no difficulty in saying that's not true, that's not logical, that has no basis. Like he's very easy to dismiss. People think, how could the Ravid dismiss the Rambam? How could he do that? What they don't know is a simple historical fact. The Ravid was older than the Rambam. You think, the Rambam wrote what he wrote, here's the Ravid's commentary, so the commentary had to come later. No, the Ravid was older than the Rambam. He was an established Rosh Yeshiva. The Rambam's manuscripts were circulating, and he said, okay, let's see this up and coming and see what he has to say. And if he says something which the Ravid didn't like, he simply said it's wrong. That's all. Right? The Rambam wasn't the Rambam when the Ravid was commenting on it. When you hear that, you understand very well that what he said was certainly not any lack of appropriate respect. And no one later would write like that. Almost no one later would write like that. So, the Rambam's position became very well known, as I have told you. What you have in the Siddur at the end of Shachris is the 13th principle is taken from the last manuscript of the commentary in the Mishnah. If you look at the text in the Gemara, it's not the last manuscript, and therefore you have to take it with caution. You really should look at the last manuscript, which is either in the Kapach edition or in the Maor edition. There are disagreements, and I will finish by telling you the story which I think I told 2 months ago at the beginning, and don't think there's so much that continuity of people who are listening. But I once had the privilege of having a Shabbos lunch in Chicago with the Novominsker Rebbe and his son-in-law and one other person. It was a very intimate Shabbos lunch. And he asked us the following question: what is the greatest accomplishment of the Rambam? So I thought, man, that's not a question for me. How would I evaluate the accomplishments of the Rambam? And he gave an answer which to me was quite surprising. He said it was his discussion of the 13 principles of Judaism. He said, I'll tell you why. Because, as I just told you, in the Rambam's time, there were many Jews, faithful and reasonably educated Jews, who thought God is a physical being. You will not find anywhere in the world any Jew today who thinks that God is physical. That's quite remarkable. If in the Rambam's time there were educated and faithful Jews who thought he was physical, wouldn't you expect, with the various different types of faithful practice of the Torah and study of the Torah, that somewhere that belief would have survived? The Rambam wiped it out. By initiating this discussion, making this a topic of discussion and analysis, and it ended up in the Siddur, I guess it was 200 or 300 years after the Rambam, and some people say it every day, that particular mistake was wiped out. That's quite a remarkable effect. When people, great Rabbanim, write their works, they have an effect on this one, an effect on that one. Some people reject. That's the normal procedure for people. And here, this particular mistake was completely wiped out. So that is something which the Rambam initiated, among many other things that he initiated this particular discussion, and it's part of the learning that a Jew should do. I don't know how much time is devoted to it in regular yeshivas or even in kiruv yeshivas, but a list of the things that we are committed to is something which, because for the Rambam anyway, that defines you as a Jew. So that it comes out that to be a Jew is not just a matter of your lineage or conversion. Your identity as a Jew is not fixed by having been born a Jew or by converting to be Jewish. You know, and I haven't put it this way before, but it's occurring to me now. There's a kind of sort of idea lurking in the cracks of the information here. We often say that you can't opt out of Judaism. You can't convert to another religion. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. But according to the Rambam, if a person changes his commitments and changes his beliefs, he will no longer be Jewish. So I wonder now, if a person changes his beliefs in such a way that he's no longer Jewish, whether then we would recognize that he's joined another religion. I think that would probably just be irrelevant. The fact that there are non-Jews that have various religions from our point of view, doesn't distinguish them one from another. What they believe in, what they do distinguishes them. And you might have a whole group that believes a certain way and does certain things in a certain way, and that distinguishes them. But it's not as if there's another religious commitment that has an identity as a religion, and they belong to that religion, and they're members of that religion. I don't think the Torah has any recognition of that category whatsoever. But he can step out of being a Jew by changing those commitments. So that means your identity as a Jew depends upon your lineage or conversion, and it depends upon what your commitments are, what your intellectual commitments are. So, as I said, there's difference of opinion about how to, about which principles they are, and there are difference of opinion about how to define the various principles. When you say that Kodesh Baruch Hu created and creates, himtzi umamtzi, he says in the beginning of the Mishnah Torah, he says the continuous, ongoing support for the world, without which the world wouldn't exist. To put it poetically, there's a flow of divine energy into the world that gives it its existence moment by moment. There's a lot of literature on how to understand what that means. There's a word that I try to avoid, but I'm not always successful. The idea of recreating the world. Mechadesh in Hebrew, which we say in the prayers, that he's Mechadesh, Tomit, Ma'aser Bereishis. Mechadesh means to make new. That's loose enough and vague enough to not commit you to any particular process. Recreate, in English, is a very problematic word. Recreate means it was created, and now, what? I'm going to create it again? But now, if something was created at 5 o'clock, and something was created at 6 o'clock, what would make them the same thing? If creating something at 5 o'clock means something brand new came into the world, why wouldn't creating something at 6 o'clock mean that something brand new came into the world? What would it mean to say, oh, it's not that new, it's a recreation of the old one? But if it's really a creation, how could it not be new? So the idea of recreating is a very problematic idea. It's not an easy idea to understand at all. And therefore, the idea of making the creation new moment by moment is something which requires a lot of thought, a lot of analysis. So here you have the Rambam's first principle. The question is, what exactly does it mean? How should we define it? Rabbi Meisman once, because he's a mathematician, explained to me how you could define it in a formalistic way. I'll explain it to you in a moment. And then when I asked him for that, filling in the details, he tossed it off as uninteresting. Imagine, he said, everything, chairs and galaxies and people and birds, everything that exists because it has two features, A and B. Those two features make it exist. Imagine that if either one were to disappear, the thing would disappear. And imagine that A is something which Baruch Hu created once, and it continues to exist identically without being recreated. But it's only a feature. It's not a thing. It's only a feature. And then B is what gets created anew, really new, brand new, moment by moment. So now, got the chair. And the chair has its A and B. And when we say that God makes it new, it means he provides more B, new B, newly created B, moment by moment. Well, without B, there won't be a chair. So the chair is the result of a process of making new moment by moment. But of course, the process is making new only the B side. The A side remains on its own. So if you ask me, is the chair made new moment by moment? Absolutely, because without B it wouldn't exist, and the B side comes in brand new, moment by moment. Well, what makes it the same chair? The A side. The A side was created once. That A side continues to exist on its own. And since the A side of the chair remains, it's the same chair because it has the same A side. So my husband says, it's not a contradiction. Here you are. Here's the solution. All you need is A and B. I said, oh, wow, that's great. What's the A and what's the B? He said, I don't care. I solved the problem, right? I can give you a definition of recreate and how it's not logically contradictory. And now that it's not logically contradictory, you can work it out on your own. So there are candidates for this. But I'm just showing you what it means to say that the Rambam gave you a principle. There's a lot of work yet to be done. The way in which some want to work it out, I'm taking this from others for him, and not because they heard Rabbi Mazum. The A would be the matter out of which it's made, and the B would be the form which is impressed in the matter to make it into the object that it is. So let's make it, okay. Let's take wood, and the wood is arranged in a shape that makes it a chair. Now, that would mean at the start of this process, of course, you push processes back, and then you have to have the origins and so on and so on. Start of this process, you have wood, let's say planks of wood, and then they're arranged in a chair shape. And let's imagine that without a constant influx of divine energy, the pieces of wood would just fall on the floor in a heap. So, what's making it a chair rather than a heap of boards on the floor is the divine energy that gives it's the form of the chair. And that's being provided moment by moment, brand new moment by moment. And without it wouldn't be a chair. So in a certain sense, I could say the chair is a result of continuous divine creation, because without it, there wouldn't be a chair. There'd just be a heap of boards on the floor. Well, what makes it the same chair from moment to moment? The answer is the same boards. So the matter has continuity, giving it its identity through time, and yet it's subject to continuous creation, because without the influence of divine energy, that matter wouldn't have that form, and it wouldn't be that thing. So that's a way to describe recreation. Now, is that what the medieval Sforim mean? Is that what the Rambam had in mind? I have no clue. It's just that when I complained that the idea of recreation is like a contradictory idea, Rabbi Mazman said, no, it doesn't have to be. Here's a way to explain it without contradiction. Okay, that's why he's my teacher. Yes, ideas like that. At any rate, that's what the Rambam started by initiating this discussion, and it's been a discussion down to the present time. You may have heard a rumor of an idea that there's no legal decisions in matters of belief or philosophy. That's dead wrong. The Rambam here has 13 principles, and he tells you his psak is that a person who denies any of these principles is outside the Jewish people. That's a pretty important psak. Pretty important legal decision. There are other things wrong with that idea, but this certainly is one of them. Okay, for me, this has been a great joy to teach this Rambam to the extent that I was able to, and things I understood it. It's been a great joy. Next week, we'll start another project.